Okay, thank you very much, Dov, and good afternoon, everybody. Yeah. Today's topic is the Kipah. The Kipah, which carries so much identity to it, right? You know, walking around without a Kipah, without your head covered, right? The Kipah is today a tremendous symbol of Jewish identity, right? I was actually in Wholesome Choice, and the person checking out said to me, "What is that on your head?" So I said, "Well, I'm Jewish, and this is a garment that Jews wear." The person said, "That's great, fist pump." So, fist pump, I continue checking out. But,
what did you say?
Fist pump. Yeah. Kipah means a covering, right? Yarmulka, right? So that comes from, well, nowadays everything's is made in China. When I grew up, everything was made in Japan, right? Right. So they made yarmulkes. No, I'm kidding about that. Right. Yarmulka comes from, it's actually Yarmulka, which comes from the words Yarei me Eloka. Yarei, fear of Eloka, of God. As we'll soon see the sources, the Talmudic sources for it. Right, because wearing a yarmulke, wearing your head covering is clearly not one of the 613 mitzvot. There's no mention of it in the Torah. Though growing up, there was always a joke. Where do you see yarmulke in the Torah? Right, the passage says Vayelech Moshe, and Moshe went. You think he went without a yarmulke, right? But of course, that's just a joke, right? So there is no Torah source for it. Yet again, like I said, we'll see Talmudic sources, and we'll see how it has evolved in a halachic sense, and then we'll conclude with a teshuva, with a halachic responsa from Moshe Feinstein in terms of a yarmulke in the workplace, if that's going to be offsetting for a person's ability to either get a job or maintain a job. So we'll see how all of these different approaches and sources are then sifted through the halachic mind and the conclusions that are reached.
But Rabbi, I'm wondering whether you're going to cover it at some point. Kipah sruga?
No, I'm not getting involved in any politics whatsoever. Right? The issue is covering one's head, and it's a pity that something that is meant to help us identify as Jews ends up being something that splits us apart, right? And causes a certain degree of factionalization, but such is life.
If you spend money for a kippah, you got a cover charge right there.
You got a cover charge, right? Okay. All right. So the first source we have is the Gemara in Kiddushin. 31a, Lamed Aleph, Lamed Aleph. There the Gemara, and we're going to, it's the third case that actually mentions the head covering, but the first two cases help set the context in which it's discussed. So we have it both in Hebrew and English. Rabbi Yitzchak, kol over aveira b'seiter. Any person who does an aveira, who transgresses, who sins, b'seiter, in a hidden way, meaning looking around to make sure that no one else should see me. Kilu dochek raglei shchina. It's as if that person is pushing away the feet, so to speak, of the divine presence. Meaning, Shenema, as the pasuk says, Koma Hashem, thus says Hashem, Hashamayim kis'i, the heavens are my seat and my throne, Va'aretz hadom raglai, and the land is my footrest. It's the place where my feet, so to speak, extend to. And a person, by transgressing in a hidden fashion, making sure no one else sees them, is in a way denying God's presence here on earth. Because if you're afraid of someone seeing you, then Hashem sees you. Levi said, a person should not walk 4 amot, 4 cubits, about 6, 7, 8 feet, Bekoma Zakufa. That's in a very high, upright, haughty fashion. Shenamar, as it says, Malay Kola Aretz Kavodo. The whole world is filled by God's honor, and one is impeding that honor of God if one is attaching too much importance to oneself. And Rabbi Huna B'Rei Yeshua lo maski arba amot gili harosh. He would not go 4 amot with his head uncovered. Amma, saying, Shechina lamala me roshi. The Shechina, the divine presence, is above me. So therefore, and that is the typical explanation that's given for a kippah, for covering our head. It makes us realize that there is a God above, and therefore we have this little separation, recognizing He's above, I'm down here below. I should not be butting heads, so to speak, with God and His presence and His domain. So the idea of the kippah, as we see in this first source of Kedushin, is that it makes us recognize that there is a God above us, and with that constant, right? It says above our Aron Kodesh, it says Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. I always feel God's presence in front of me. And the kippah is a way, the Yarmulka, the kippah, is a way of helping to feel that presence above.
Do we know that the Kohanim in the Beth HaMikdash all covered their head?
Yes, one of there were 4 garments that every Kohen would wear, and 8 garments that the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, would wear. The 4 garments that every Kohen would wear was a turban, like knicker pants, a long shirt, and a belt. And the Kohen Gadol had 8 garments, and his was a more elaborate headpiece.
So if you visited there, would they say you have to cover your head?
We'll see about that.
I remember in the old schools, long time ago, the cousin wore these big hats.
Right.
Yeah. Very impressive.
Yeah. Okay, the Gemara in Shabbos is listing different sages of the Talmud, explaining what they think that if they deserve reward, it would be for this. Rav Nachman said, Titi li, right? I would deserve reward. Dekayam gimel suudot b'Shabbos. I make sure to always have shalosh suudot, to have 3 meals on Shabbos, thereby giving honor to the day of Shabbat. Rav here said, Titi li dekayamet iyun tefillah, that I placed a lot of emphasis on my davening. And Rav Huna, B'Rei Yeshua said, Teti li, the losad yedalet amot below b'kilu harosh. I never went 4 cubits, 4 amot, with my head uncovered. Okay. The Gemara in Shabbos 156, Kuf Nun Vav, is talking about the concept of mazel. Mazel, we call it luck, but mazel literally means that which flows down from the heavens, not as a result of my actions. Right? So there's certain situations that a person is given in life not because of their actions. A person looks a certain way. A person has certain tendencies, has certain predispositions. Right? That's their mazel. So Gemara says, Ein mazel li Yisroel, which means that we have the ability to override any of this, any such mazel.
Rabbi,
Yes.
This is mazel used also to talk about the constellation.
Well, that's the idea that it flows from there. Yes. So the Gemara says, from this case also we'll see the concept of Ein mazel li Yisroel, that we are free from this mazel, right? The English translates it as the planetary influence, right? The constellations. The mother of Nachman Yitzchak, when he's a very little boy, Amri la Kaldai, a certain astrologer, said to her, Berich Ganva Hava, your child will be a thief. He has a predisposition towards taking things, even if they do not belong to him. What did she do to try to counter this? Lo shavakte guluye reshe. She did not allow him to uncover his head. She said to him, Kasi reshech, cover your head. In order that you will have this fear of heaven. And also pray that God should take care of you. He did not know why she had said that to him. One day, Yativ, he was sitting in the Kagars and he was learning, Tusei Dikla, beneath a palm tree. Nafal Gulime, I don't like the English. Me aluye reshe, right? Temptation overcame him. Well, what the words mean in the Hebrew is nafal glima, the cloak that he would use to cover his head fell off of his head. So all of a sudden, he was not with his head covered. Dali and he looked up Chaza Ladikla, and he saw this palm tree that was filled with dates. Alme Yitzre, and his inclination became overpowered him, overwhelmed him. Salak, and he went up Paske Likibure Bishine, and he bit off a cluster of the dates. So again, we see this idea of the head covering helping a person in terms of their fear of heaven, their acknowledging that there is a God above. The last of the Talmudic, of the Gemara sources, is back to Kedushin. Here it's Lamed Gimel, Amud Aleph 33a. I'm sorry. Ravina Haviyativ, the middle of the top line, Kamed Rav Yirmiyah Midifte. Rav Yirmiyah was sitting in front of, Ravina was sitting in front of Rav Yirmiyah from Difte. Chalif al Gavra Kameh. A certain person passed in front of him, Velo Michasei Reisha, and his head was not covered. Amar, he said, Kama Chotzif HaGavra, right? How impudent, how much Chotzif, lashon of chutzpah, right? You know, the audacity of that person. Amar Leis, so Rav Yirmiyah said to him, Dilma mimata mechasya nihu. Perhaps he comes from the city of Mata Mechasya, Digisi ba Rabbanan, where scholars are very common.
Hello.
Now, according to this, it seems the issue was not his walking around with his head uncovered. The issue was walking in front of scholars with your head uncovered. That was a show of disrespect. To which Rav Yirmiyah said, well, perhaps he comes from Mata Mechasya, where there are scholars all around. So a person doesn't feel, oh, I'm going in front of a scholar now, I best cover my head. Now, what we see from these sources, especially the last source, is it doesn't necessarily seem to be that this was the fully accepted common practice. This was something special that the mother of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak did because she was told that he had this predisposition towards thievery. Rav Nachman felt, I deserve extra reward, right? And the Gemara Kedushin says, Rav Huna would not walk 4 cubits bareheaded. The Shekhinah is above my head. All the while indicating that this was not the regular practice. This seems to have been something that was above and beyond. So from the Gemara, it's not clear at all, is this regular practice? It seems pretty clear that in the time of the Gemara, it was not regular practice. It was something that was done in the presence of a scholar, or something that was done as an added element of bringing a fear of heaven onto oneself. The next source, before we get to the actually halachic codification of this idea, the next source is from Mesechet Sofra. I have both in Hebrew and in English. And I've written there is a collection of Braitot or halachic teachings of the Tanaim not included in the Mishnah. And there it says as follows. The second line down. Well, let's take the top line. Pocheach, someone who is pocheach, meaning hanirin kra'av, his feet, a person is barefoot. O bigadav prumim, or a person whose garments are torn or open, and his shoulders are revealed. O misha rosho megula, or someone whose head is uncovered. Pores al shema. They used to have a certain form of davening, which was a shortened form of davening if a person came late. So a person in that state could lead this, he could be the chazan in this shortened version of davening. So we're now talking about a person without a kippah leading davening to a certain degree.
Right.
A limited leading of davening. But we're talking about in a shul, up by the bima, right? Leading, again, in a limited way, but leading the davening. V'yesh omer, there are those that say, one second, bikra'av, if he's barefoot, o bigadav prumim, or his garments are torn, pores, he can lead this limited mode of davening. Avalo barosh megula, but not with his head uncovered. So the second opinion here is that such a person cannot lead any prayers with his head uncovered. Why? She'eno rishai lahotzi askara mipiv. Oh, because you can't say God's name with your head uncovered. So therefore, he cannot even lead this limited mode of davening, because this limited mode of davening certainly includes the mention, the azkara of Shem Hashem, of the name of God. And the second opinion says one cannot utter the name of God with their head uncovered. The first opinion then held that a person could say the name of God and could pray, make a bracha, and even lead the davening in this limited mode with their head uncovered. So those are the two opinions that we have from the Tanoic period. And we see, again, from the Gemara cases, the Gemara stories, that some did, some didn't. Some did, or it was expected to be done under certain circumstances, but not necessarily under other circumstances. Let's take a look now at how the halacha is codified. Let's first go to the earliest codifier of the halacha, which is Rambam, Maimonides. There in the laws of tefillah, Hilchos Tefillah, the laws of prayer, we have it both in Hebrew and in English. Tikkun HaMalbushim. A person should dress properly. Ketzad, how is that? Mitakein Malbushav Techila. A person should adjust one's clothing. Umitzayein Atzmo. Umahader. And make a person very, very presentable, neat. Umahader. Right? And even, right, embellish. Right? Some people will put on a jacket for davening to show a little added respect for the davening. Some people will wear a hat for davening. All of that is the idea of showing some added respect for their coming and standing before God in prayer. Shneimar, based on the verse that says in Tehillim, Hishtachavu laHashem bahadrat kodesh. You should bow to Hashem in the holy, in a glow, in the glory of holiness. Right? A person should not stand to daven. Here he says it in his undershirt. And a funda, I think, also means like a money pouch, like a fanny pack. Right? They used to wear their money pouches outside. Velo berosh megula. The Rambam says, one should not stand in davening with their head uncovered. Velo beraglayim megulot, nor barefoot. Im derech anshe hamakom shelo yamdu befanim ve'agadolim el v'vatei haraglayim. Right? If in such a place one would not stand in front of an important person, a respected person, barefoot, right, without wearing shoes. I remember there was a certain sports team that had won a championship. It was like a college sports team, and they were invited to the White House. And one of the players, she was wearing flip-flops, and it was a whole brouhaha that she went to the White House and met the President of the United States, right, wearing flip-flops, right? That's nowadays, I think it's the usual wear, right, anywhere and everywhere. But that's when it was first becoming, so there's a certain concept that that's not how you would stand before an important, respected person. So that's not how one should stand in davening. So the Rambam here is only talking about covering one's head when davening. However, the Rambam in Hilchos Deot, well, let's see what he says over there in the laws of conduct. Tzniut gedola noagim talmidei chachamim ba'atzman. A tremendous degree of modesty. Torah sages conduct themselves with. Lo yitbazu. And maybe they should not act in a demeaning fashion, right? Because they're not just representing themselves, they're representing the Torah. And therefore they need to act in a respectable fashion. V'lo yitgalu roshan. And they should not uncover, reveal their heads. V'lo gufan. Nor should they bare their bodies. So again, according to the Rambam seems to be following, he seems to be following, right, this second opinion of Mesechet Sofrim, right? That when saying God's name, when davening, one should cover one's head. Otherwise, no need, not necessarily, unless you happen to be a Torah sage where you have this added tzniut, this added modesty, this tzniut gedola that he calls. However, the Shulchan Aruch takes a different approach. The Shulchan Aruch, which is our code of Jewish law, Shulchan Aruch draws from many of the different earlier opinions and then reaches his conclusion. There in Shulchan Aruch, Orech Chaim, there are 4 parts to Shulchan Aruch. Orech Chaim literally means the way of life, and it deals with the day-to-day halachot, the laws of davening, which would include tzitzit and tefillin, right? But the laws of davening, the laws of Shabbos, the laws of all the holidays. That's our life, our way of life, right? The way of life. Choshen Mishpat deals with monetary laws. Even HaEzer deals with marriage laws, and Yoredeya deals with a wide gamut of laws, including the laws of family purity, the laws of kashrut, right? And okay. So Shulchan Aruch rules, Aser leilech bekoma zekufa, one should not walk in a very upright, haughty manner. V'lo yelech dalid amot b'giloi harosh, and one should not walk 4 amot, 4 cubits b'giloi harosh, with one's head uncovered. This is one of the first sources of the Gemara that we saw, actually the first one. The Rabbi Yeshua did not, the first opinion of Shimon Levi said don't walk around in an upright, haughty fashion. And Rav Hu, not that upright is, right, we're not speaking against good posture, right? We're saying, walking around as if, you are God's gift to mankind, and thereby pushing God out a little bit. And then Rav Yehuda, the son of Yeshua, would not go 4 amot with his head uncovered. The Shulchan Aruch rules that is really the ruling for everyone, right? He doesn't mention it just when davening. He doesn't mention it just when in the presence of a sage. He doesn't mention it, as the Rambam did, just for a Torah sage. But a person should not go with one's head uncovered. It does not need to be a kippah, right? It could be a hat. It could be a baseball hat. It could be any sort of covering. But one should not go 4 amot with one's head uncovered. Now, so far the reason that we've had is because it helps one focus on the good Lord above and recognize and appreciate one's place in this world that we walk around. The Mishnah Brura, where I have it both in Hebrew and in English, but it's not on the same page. So the Hebrew begins on page 2. The English is all on page 3. So there we say Dalet Amot. So the Shulchan Aruch said you shouldn't go the 8 cubits with your head uncovered, seeming indicating that less than that is not a problem at all. Which Brura brings Umidud Chasidut, and a way of being extra careful is Afilu Pachot Midalet Amot, even less than 4 Amot. But Afilu Be'eit Hashina B'Layla, even if a person is sleeping at night. V'yeshem, it's not in Lomar that Afilu Dalet Amot, those that disagree and say no. Even these 4 Amot, Eino Aser Midina, it's not a real prohibition, only Latznuin B'Masein, only to those who are very, very careful, modest in their ways, like we saw the Rambam had said. But the Taz wrote later on, the Bismanenu Isser Gamor Midina. He says it's an absolute prohibition, Liot B'Gili Harosh, to be with your head uncovered, V'afilu Yoshev V'Beito, even when sitting in one's house. Ayin Sham Hatam. See over there the reason. And the Taz's reason is that amongst non-Jews, specifically uncovering one's head is a way, right, when one goes into a church, right, one uncovers their head. So our uncovering our head is mimicking, going out, following in the ways of the religious edicts of non-Jews.
Isn't that showing respect for a person? That's what they're kind of doing. You know, like you take off your hat.
So our way of showing respect is having the hat on.
Yeah.
Right? And the Magen Avraham says even young children, it's proper to get them accustomed to covering their heads in order that they'll have a Mata D'Shmaya, in order that they will have this fear of heaven. As we saw, we had that Gemara in Shabbos, Kuf Nun Vav. That was the mother who was told that her son has a predisposition towards thievery, and from a young age she had him covering his head. Kasi Rasha, cover your head, in order that you will have the fear of heaven. Right? Dishmaya, yes, we've heard Siyata Dishmaya, meant help from heaven. This is Emata, fear, Dishmaya, of the heaven, the same word either. But he said, and you should know that in terms of covering the head, right, it's enough for one to put their hand on their head. We'll soon discuss that further. If a person is getting a haircut, or more common in that time, getting the lice removed from one's head, right, or going bathing, right, so then then one uncovers one's head. And Pri Megadim wrote that to go 4 amot under the heavens, there it's not enough to cover one's head.
Why 4? Why they choose 4?
That's considered a significant distance, a significant moving. Okay, the next, on page 3, now if you follow in Hebrew, and if you're in the English, so now it's number 12 there, in the English of the Mishnah Brura. B'gilui harosh, right? One should not go with head uncovered. The kol shekain she'asu levarech, and certainly it's prohibited to make a blessing. V'hu adin l'mod, similarly to be prohibited to learn Torah, v'gilui harosh, with one's head uncovered. V'lo mahani b'zeh kisu hayad. And then he says, interestingly, it's not enough to cover your head with your hand. Why? Diyad v'rosh chad gufa inun. Because the hand and the head is all one entity. It's all one body. So I'm using my skin to cover. I already have my skin covering. Some even have hair covering, right? But it's all the same thing. It's all the same body. The body can't cover the body. There are those who are lenient in extenuating circumstances. You get up at night. Rosha l'stot, you want to drink. Ve'ein lo kova b'rosha, you don't have a covering on your head. So there, it's sufficient to cover his head with his hand and make the blessing before you drink. But it's best to do what people do. Right? You take the garment, right? You take the sleeve, or even as a short sleeve, right? And you put it over your head. That way the garment is covering. Interesting. This happens often. Now sometimes a person is putting on their head tefillin. So what do? They take off their kipah in order to put on their head tefillin. But you need to make a bracha, Ashkenazim, before we put on their head tefillin. So therefore they'll be making a blessing with their head uncovered. So people are going to write, you have to be careful when a person is putting on the tefillin, the head tefillin, not to make the bracha with his head uncovered. And a pruk misarot, right? And if a person has a toupee, even those even those which have like a garment, some cloth underneath, yesh lasor, even there one should not walk around with the toupee saying, oh, that covers my head. Because of its of the appearance. Sheyomu shesarotain, right? Because people will think that really is one's own hair, which is of course the dream of everyone wearing a toupee, that people think that there really is that person's hair, right? And therefore it will give off the appearance of a person going around with their head uncovered. Marit ayin, exactly. And there are those who are lenient. Okay, so what we have over here is that the halacha has adopted, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, adopted this the stricter approach, that which the Talmud presented as something that some did above and beyond. And Masechet Sovim had two opinions: if one could or could not say God's name with head uncovered. And halacha has adopted, right, two factors involved. One is the yirat shamayim, the fear of heaven. The other one is going in the ways, following in the ways, copying the ways of non-Jews, so that we should not go 4 amot with our head uncovered, midid chasidah even less than that, and certainly when praying, making a bracha, learning any mention of God's name or learning of God's Torah, certainly there one's head should be covered. Yes, Steve?
I think there's a parallel with when we say tachanun and we cover our faces.
Oh, that's a good point.
To do that
Yeah, right. After Mincha Shachar, when we say tachanun, so I like to point out, one should not go like this, because the whole thing of tachanun is covering one's face. I run into the same issue that my skin can't cover my skin. So one would either have a sleeve or a short sleeve, or even take a tissue, hopefully a clean plate, right? It might be easier to find a tissue than a plate in the shul, so one might take a tissue and do tachanun in such a way.
Talis?
A talis for sure. Yeah, so shacharit it's easy, right? We're typically wearing a talis at shacharis. Mincha not necessarily. So that's where the tissue, plate, whatever it might be. Even the hat, though, you could bend it down and get the brim over there.
What about the guy with the plate in the hat? You see it, huh?
Huh? Okay. So a question was posed to Rav Moshe Feinstein. And that's the bottom one. I don't have that in English, but I'll read in Hebrew and of course translate. The question was posed to Rav Moshe Feinstein. Can a person go with their head uncovered if that is for the needs of one's livelihood, of one's job, of one's profession? Okay. He wrote, Hine bedavar shetzarech lasig mishre. In the issue that someone needs to be hired for a job. Shetzarech lipagesh b'alei misrad. He needs to meet with the different people at that office. And people are saying to him, that you can't go into this interview with the yarmulke on. Thankfully, my interviews never had such an issue.
How do you know?
Huh? If it would be an issue, then it wouldn't be for me. Any of the Jewish schools or shuls, that would not be for me, if that would be an issue. So the interview, we need to go there without a kippah, and he'll need to sit there at his job with his head uncovered, below kippah. Shekarin Yarmulka, known as the Yarmulka. Shimi Lavesham Kipah, if he'll wear his yarmulke there, he will not get hired for the position. And besides that, the person who advocated and was able to line up this interview for him, Omer said to him, if you go there with the yarmulke, you are undermining me. It's going to make me look bad, right? That I tried to get a person into a job, a person who's clearly not going to be a match, not going to be a fit, not an eligible candidate for the position. So it's going to look bad on me, the person who had arranged it. Right? Now, once he be hired, right, it's possible they'll say that he can sit there with the yarmulke. Now, he needs this for his parnasa. There in Denver, happened to be. Right? That going for the interview with a kippah is basically it's a veto. That was the question that was posed. Rav Moshe answers. And we're going to see how he weaves his way through the different sources and the different opinions that we've had. It appears to me to mutar that is permitted. Why? According to the law in the Gemara, ularov hashitot, and according to most of the opinions, havi gilia rosh af lelech b'shuk, uncovering the head, even walking in the street, even more than 4 amot, is midat chasidut, right? Is an extra thing, according to many opinions. Aval kazu shekol adam tzorech litnaheg midat chasidut. However, when it comes to this area, the Jewish people have accepted upon themselves this midat chasidut, this extra. They've accepted upon themselves as that is what a Jew does. That is the minhag. That is the accepted way of a religious Jew. And even to mention God's name, Begilu Yarosh, with the head uncovered, we ourselves saw in Masechet Sofrim that there were 2 opinions about that, right? Even mentioning God's name. And the Gra, right, said also that he's not sure what is the clear source for it. And the Vilna Gaon, his conclusion is that even to say God's name with one's head uncovered is not an absolute clear halacha. So therefore, Yisroel, even though this has become the accepted custom of religious Jews everywhere in the world, that a religious Jew covers his head, wears his yarmulke. Lo garum minhagi Yisrael kedoshim. Certainly, this is no less than a holy minhag that has been accepted across the board. Uvadai lo adif me'asei mamish. So it's no less than a holy minhag, but it's no more than a mitzvat aseh, than a positive command, a Torah positive command. Julehev said gadol, and there, if it's going to cause a person a great loss, how you doing? Good to see you. It's going to cause a person a big loss. Eina mechuyav. A person is not obligated to fulfill it. To ones mammon who ones the gadi mitzvah say, right? Losing out money is considered onus. It's considered an extenuating circumstance beyond your control when it comes to a mitzvah say. And we'll see in Siman Tov Reish Nun Vav, Vav sheyoter mechomesh ein tzarich levavez al mitzvah. Right, more than 1/5 of your earnings, whatever it is, a person doesn't need to spend on mitzvot. And the Magen Avram says until 1/10, but up to 1/10, one is obligated. And the Beis Yosef says he doesn't know where he got that from. Vim Kain, and if so, Kol Shekain, certainly Begili Harosh. We're talking about uncovering one's head in order to either get the job or to maintain the job and work at the job. She'eino aseh de Torah, which is not a Torah level positive command. V'af lo aseh de Rabbanan, it's not even a clear rabbinic positive command. Ela minag tov, but it's a proper minag that's been accepted across the world, right? And ones, mammon who ones, and losing out on money is considered significant. V'asad mishu shul panasato, who has to go yota af mechomesh, right? And not getting the job is going to affect a lot more than 1/5 of your earnings, or 1/10 of your earnings is going to affect all of your earnings, right? She'eno mechuyav. So in such a situation, a person is not obligated. If it's going to affect one's livelihood, one is not obligated to wear the yarmulke at work. So what we're left with is that from the Talmud we see that there were different approaches. Mesechet Sofrim, we saw that there were different approaches, even when it came to mentioning God's name. The Shulchan Aruch, now the Marshal and others were more lenient, but the codified law we have in the Shulchan Aruch is that a person, certainly when making a bracha, and even walking, Dalet Amot, in Reshut HaRabim, one should cover their head. A yarmulke, a hat, whatever it might be. And that is the strong, widely accepted, like I began, that it's almost, in New York, right, the identifying factor is this boy or man, Orthodox or not, is he wearing a yarmulke or not, right? It's become, I wouldn't say a uniform, but I'd say it is probably, the identifying factor, right? So certainly it is a minhag kadosh, a holy, strong minhag that has been accepted across the board. However, Rav Moshe says, in a situation where it's going to affect one's livelihood, right? So there, if a person can wear some sort of a head covering that will not, affect, then a person should, right? If you're working at a big law firm, right? So some of them will not have a problem with you wearing a yarmulke. Those that will have a problem with you wearing a yarmulke will also have a problem with you wearing a baseball hat. That will exacerbate the issue. That will not help the issue. So in a situation like that, I know someone very dear to me was working. Actually, it was a Jewish company, Philip Brothers, right? Years and years and years ago, right? It was a German Jewish company, and amongst the German Jews, right there, they would not wear the yarmulke. So even though it was a Jewish company, and I think the vast majority of employees there were Jewish and were Orthodox Jews, nevertheless, no one was allowed to wear their yarmulke, right, at work, right? They go out for a lunch break, they walk out of the building, they put the yarmulke on. Right? They leave work in the afternoon, finish working, put the yarmulke on, but in the building, if that's what is needed, that's what is required, or right, in order to get the job, or to maintain the job, or to maintain, let's say I'm self-employed, but in order to maintain my clientele, it's going to confuse issues, bring other issues in, right? So then a person might say, "Hey, it's my business. If they don't want to be my customer because of this, then who needs them?" Fair enough. That's your prerogative, but that's not one's obligation when it comes to working. So we see how Moshe Zatzal navigates the way through what is a mitzvah aseh, a positive Torah command, what is a positive rabbinic command, and this is neither of those, but it is a strong minhag that's been accepted throughout, and therefore, if it's going to cause the loss of money, one need not. Otherwise, one certainly should.
Who's the judge?
Supreme Court.
No, but who's the judge? How do you know that it's going to cause you?
Well, I'll tell you, in today's world, look, a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, went for an interview, right? And if I remember correctly, right, it wasn't wearing his kippah, right? Upon receiving the position, right, he asked.
Okay.
He said, "I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I'm most comfortable covering my head. I always cover my head, right? With the office, is there an issue, right? Would there be any issue with my covering my head, right?" And he was told that there would not be no problem at all, right? So there's nothing wrong in asking, right, and finding out, right? Actually, I think it's another friend. I'm not sure the first story who that was, trying to remember, but a friend of mine who was in Ner Yisroel with me, Ner Israel, the yeshiva in Baltimore. So this was a classic, because in Ner Yisroel, you're learning 10, 12 hours during the day and taking a few hours of college at night, right? So it's a real heavy load, right? But because of that, it takes you a while. You're only taking 2 courses a semester, so it takes a while, right? So very often, the person who's looking at your resume says, why were you on this, this slower course of study? Though you get a lot of credits from the yeshiva, but it was stretched out. He spent 2 years studying in Israel, so he was coming to a little bit older. So a lot of guys try to just kind of skip over it, but he decided that he would use it as a positive. So he said, well, to be quite honest with you, I study at Ner Israel Rabbinical College, and in addition to the college load, to get my degree in economics, or I think get a double degree in economics and whatever else, and business, right? I've actually been studying, not to be a rabbi, but I've been studying Talmud and Bible about 8 to 10 hours a day. Ooh. besides my college study. And the guy's eyes, he goes, "Wow, that's amazing." Mm. So if he was onto something, he said, "Well, I'll tell you the truth. From first grade, I had a double curriculum. I learned a second language, reading and understanding it, and I had all of my religious studies in addition to the regular public school curriculum, and all, in New York and the regions and all that's expected from a regular education." And the guy was like, "Wow, that's amazing." And this is a quote that reverberated around Ner Yisroel for months afterwards, right? So the guy, one of the VPs was walking by. So the guy who's interviewing, says, "Hey, Bob, come here. Bob, you got to come here. I want you to meet Saul. Saul's no slouch, Bob. He went to Ner Israel." So that was a quote that reverberated around the yeshiva for months afterwards. He's no slouch. He went to Ner Israel. So sometimes it's a plus, but there are people, and there are prejudices, and there are situations where a person will say, no, listen, I can't. We can't have that. So we have clients coming from here, coming from there, and we want to just stay as neutral. They won't say parav, I'll say parav. They'll say as neutral as possible, that whether it is, Sheikh so-and-so coming in, whether it's Mr. Farrakhan coming in, or whether it's Chaim Shmuel coming in, no one's going to feel that they will not be represented best. Yes, Chai Rivka.
My two sons, the oldest and the younger, were the Orthodox sons. My oldest son Daniel, about 30 years ago, 27 years ago, worked on Wall Street, and nobody had a Kipah on Wall Street. And he walked into his boss, Goldman Sachs, and he said he would like to start wearing a Kipah. And they said, you know what? We could use some diversity around here. Everybody looks like you. With a great suit. Great.
Yeah.
So he was one of the few.
Right.
David.
Now in Goldman Sachs, they want some people not to wear a yarmulke, so there's some
No.
diversity. I'm kidding.
No, they like the idea.
Yeah,
They
No,
thought it
okay,
was
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And David, the youngest son, he went to every interview with the yarmulke. Every interview
Yeah.
with the yarmulke. And his last job, Splunk, which I'm wearing there, t-shirt, he eventually, there were hundreds of people. He was the only one with the yarmulke. And they respected him unbelievably.
Yeah.
So it depends on the nature of the company, the consciousness of the company.
Right.
If a company has a very limited idea of human beings and of life, narrow-minded, they
Yeah.
don't want it.
Yeah.
But he just went ahead in interview, and he got these jobs, and he got that job, and nobody minded.
Yeah.
Look,
So what I'm saying is, all your stories are correct, but in today's world, you go to the supermarket. Who do you see in the supermarket? You see kids who are mentally, special needs. You see people with head coverings because they're Muslims. You see all sorts of things. Diversity is very common nowadays, and people who don't want diversity are really rather narrow-minded.
Look at some people's dafka. They want a Jewish lawyer and they want a Jewish accountant.
They want
Some-
a Jewish lawyer, and they want and the doctor and everything.
That often
But
happens.
Absalom walks around with his yarmulke at the hospital.
There's a book here, and I was reading it, talking about there's a person in the military, and they were an attorney, and they were representing somebody, and they won the case. But then the guy that they were up against got annoyed at them because he was wearing his kippah. He brought him up on charges for not wearing the uniform because the kippah wasn't part of the official Air Force uniform. And went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled against him, saying, you're guilty of this court-martial because that's not part of the uniform. But then the next year, Congress changed the rules and said it's acceptable to wear alternate head coverings. It wasn't the case of not wearing something because he could have put on a cap.
Do you remember, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, there was this big court case in Orange County about a number of police officers. And it was a question if they had used undue force against the person, and they were being, right? And there was a fellow who came here.
I know
He was,
very well.
yeah, he was davening here every morning, right, coming from Los Angeles. And he was he's a Hasidic looking fellow with, and he was representing the case there with his yarmulke, and he was representing the police officers, right, with his yarmulke, and he had a beard and payas, right, and he's a top lawyer. He was just here a couple of weeks ago. Also, he davened here. He was here on a conference. I saw him again.
But a lot of people disagreed with the decision that was made in that case, and it was not good from certain perspectives that he had this
Jewish lawyer.
A lot of people felt the police officer should have been convicted.
Yeah.
What they did was outrageous.
Okay, but I don't think a person needs to. Yeah. Look, he wasn't representing him as a Jew. He was representing him as he was a Jew representing him.
I'm not saying that
Yeah.
I felt that way, but I know a lot of people, because I listen to what people say.
Yeah. No, there were actually writers about it in our in the Jewish magazine here, or whatever, the OC. So he'll say, why is he walking around like that? And someone said, well, that's how religious Jews walk around. Hello, Orange County. That's how religious Jews walk around. Good morning. Welcome to the 21st century. Yeah.
Is there any specific size, a minimum size, a yarmulke?
Oh, interesting. Interesting. So Rav Moshe also speaks about that. You know, Rav Shlomo Kluger's felt that it needs to fully cover the head. Rav Moshe says it covers most. It covers most of the head, right? Then it's sufficient as a sign of that yirat shamayim, of that fear of heaven. Stephen and Dove.
So bottle caps are not.
Bottle caps might be a problem.
Might be a problem.
Yes.
No, that wasn't what I.
Okay.
That wasn't what I was raising my hand about. Me personally, but this goes back 40, 50 years when I was interviewing for jobs. I chose not to wear a kippah to do any interviews. When I got the job, and usually a second interview or whatever, then I spoke with my prospective boss about the fact that I was a committed Jew and I had certain requirements and restrictions, and we worked that out, and there was never a problem.
Yeah. I know a guy who didn't bring his yarmulke, and he sat down, and his interviewer was wearing a yarmulke. Boy, did he feel stupid. Yes, Dove.
How do we make sure people that come to shul will have kippah on?
Well, we keep us outside over there, and if a person forgets, then we gently remind them. Right? I try to keep one or two in my stender over there.
We can just like this and it will go on their head?
Well, no, I have to go over and just give them a handshake with the yarmulke in my hand, and that way it's a discreet way of look, most people, if it does happen, they forgot, and they appreciate our letting them know.
Like even some of the non-Jewish people come to a bar mitzvah, like sometimes they're cool with it.
Yeah.
One other thing, it's based on my observations, but maybe I haven't seen enough communities and so on. It seems as if Sephardim are more likely to walk around outside without kippah.
Yeah, that's correct.
And is that based on any sock from their readers?
Interesting. It's a Shulchan Aruch that ruled about the Dalet Amos, right? It was the Rambam who said, when saying God's name and the extra tznius, right? But the Shulchan Aruch, right? What they follow, the Mechaber, right? So it did say, not to go Dalet Amos, right? I think again, it's not a Torah assay, it's not a rabbinic assay.
Right?
It's a very strong minhag.
Okay.
In certain communities, right? Probably in a lot of these Sephardic communities, that did not become their minhag, right? It's interesting. Ashkenazic Jews who are mostly growing up or living in basically Christian societies. So there, the Taz says not covering our head is a way of following the way of the non-Jews, right? In the Muslim societies, right? So there, that's not the issue, right? The Muslims many also cover their heads, right? So you don't. I'm just conjecture now. You don't really have the issue that the Taz brings up, right? That's not really an issue over there. It's not a religious practice to have one's head uncovered.
The Jews from the East, like the Iranians, are not really Sephardic. The Jews who really are Sephardic, whose origins in Spain, with the Inquisition and all that, it wouldn't be very wise to walk around wearing a yarmulke when they were always downplaying and denying that they're Jewish.
But they wore turban. Didn't they wear turban?
Yeah.
No.
We had one of the older presidents of this will end. It was a great story. He was in Rome. He had met one of the heads of the OU. He had met with the Pope, and he was in Rome, right? And the Pope wears yarmulke. That's true, right? As do the bishops, right? But the Pope mobile was passing by the street, right? So everybody goes down on the ground and sort of bows, right? and he was unsure what to do. And he looked around and saw about another 20 people with baseball hats, also unsure what to do. Who was that? All of the Jews in Vatican City were there wearing their baseball hats instead of their yarmulkes. They're like, now what do we do? We're not bowing down, but so
Wow.
very, very often.
In Japan.
You know who's who. You see the baseball hat, you see the denim skirt. Oh, there's a religious couple. Yeah.
No, when I was in Japan, the Shintos all wear yarmulkes. The priests.
Uh-huh.
And they wear what look like sisters also.
Oh, yeah?
And they do a few other things, so who knows?
Interesting. Okay, my friends, we'll call it over here. Yeshakoach, everybody.
Okay.